Does anyone have an immediate question? While you're formulating your thoughts, I would just like to ask Karen about your own interest in the subject, given that you're from Chicago and a film and television editor, correct? Mm-hmm. So what was the inspiration for making this film?
Thank you. I've always been interested in language and culture in general, but hadn't been a part of any language revitalization. I wasn't familiar with the whole world of language revitalization, and I was teaching a film editing class in Chicago, and I was sent to Alaska by my employer to teach a week-long class. And was surprised to find that all the students in the class were learning the software to continue to preserve their language and culture. I was accustomed to groups who were trying to get their little student film made, or, this was such a more meaningful goal that this group had. And I was fascinated and asked a million questions, and it sort of grew from there into I'd like to make a movie about this, and they decided to trust me. I'm not sure why, but 5 years later, here we are.
Great. Now here's a mic has arrived. Just watch your feet. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
In the scene with the Words Council, it seemed that April had a computer with a word for a certain type of basket, and the elders were saying, no, we never used that word. I wonder if you could elaborate on that, and specifically, where did the word that she had on the computer, where did that come from?
Could you rephrase the question?
Sure. Yeah, my understanding of the question is what, in reference to the Words Council scene. Oh, hello. Where there was the misunderstanding regarding the word for weaving, and April was looking at her computer and seeing a word, and then the elders were recalling that wasn't at all what weaving had sounded like to them, so it seemed wrong. She was looking at archives a combination of archives put together by linguist Jeff Lear, who had worked in the oral histories and gone to other writings from the church to amass what is various versions of an Alutiiq dictionary. So she was referencing those files. And Linda, you were there. Did you get any other impression of what was happening there that day?
I think you summed it up pretty well, but I think it also had to do with the northern and southern dialect as well, because with the Alutiiq language, there's a northern dialect and a southern dialect, and sometimes the words can mean the exact same thing, but they're two completely different words. So I think it was a combination of the old dictionary that Jeff Lear had done, and maybe of the different dialectal regions.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think people have prepared questions yet, so please, if you do have them. But I'd just like to know, because it's so interesting to visit this place, you shot for how many months of the year, and how many months is it snowy and below zero?
Well, as you saw in the little hand map and the map, Kodiak is pretty south Alaska, so we don't get below zero very often. Our climate's pretty temperate. It's actually very similar to the Pacific Northwest. When I was growing up in Kodiak, we would have snow from early October through April. Nowadays, it's November, sometimes through February, but it depends on the winter too.
So when they're talking about swimming, how many months can you swim? Presumably, it's the ocean.
It's the ocean.
So is it just like Vancouver, June, July, August?
It's typically in the summertime, but it always surprises me, especially throughout our camp. You know, if we walked into the ocean, our little toes would get cold and we'd get scared and walk back. The kids just run right in there. They don't, I don't know, they're numb or something. So their ability to swim in the ocean is much larger than ours.
Okay. Yes, a question here, please.
I'm curious about how long the intensive effort to bring back the language, how long has that period been now?
So I started working for my Native community in 1992. There were very few people that we knew of that spoke any part of the language. We didn't have a written language. We had a linguist that was not a local man who developed an alphabet, and he had worked with a very small select group of elders at the time. So I've been doing it for 25 years. And in the last 15 years, it's really been growing. In the last 10 years, it's been greater. In the last 5 years, we've gotten some movement. We have resources, we have teachers, we have I have 2 children, 19 and 14. They know way more of the language than I do, and it's because of those efforts. So really, that I know of, 25 years.
Could you...
I thought that marvelous scene where the woman who was keeping track of the book that had the old speakers and that she was putting in new, and I was curious about what the balance of that number equation was now. I mean, you say that your daughters speak better than, you know, so
It's getting there, but it's still pretty small.
Yeah.
You know, that's been the greatest challenge, is developing teachers. You know, in order to produce fluent speakers, you have to work with the youngest population. So our 80-year-old elders can't spend hours upon hours working with 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. They get tired. So we need to develop people that are younger, that are more energetic, that can teach the language, and it's been the biggest challenge, I would say.
Yes, please.
I saw that you had a very notable American production company behind the film, and I'm wondering, what are your hopes for distribution and what kind of impact you might wish for the film, and what people can do who are moved by the story?
Perhaps people in the balcony couldn't hear that question. I'll just repeat it. Generally, a question about the production. Well, a note that there's an important production company behind, but what's the future of the film in terms of entering the marketplace, being distributed and seen?
We don't yet have distribution on the film. This is our world premiere, so we're just starting to get it out there. As far as the impact, we hope to see the film part of educational programs, part of community screenings, part of other language programs, helping and empowering other communities dealing with this. And, you know, ultimately being part of the greater conversation that there needs to be greater support for language revitalization programs and greater recognition of the healing power of language revitalization. So, you know, nothing much.
Well, I'm only going to fill in when there's no hands up, so please.
So I'm a language teacher, and I just spent time working with the Ministry of Education on the new language curriculum for 8 languages. So this is really close to me, but what kind of pressure can we put on the Ministry of Education to make sure that these languages are mandated and taught in schools?
Are you speaking of British Columbia?
Yeah, British Columbia.
So the question is specifically, what kind of pressure can we as citizens put on our own governments to enrich these programs?
I can talk. As far as Canada, I don't know. I can tell you for the US and for Alaska, in the state of Alaska, we've, April Lactonin counselor, the PhD that was speaking at the conference, she's a part of a statewide language council that does put pressure on our legislature to make sure that our Indigenous languages are taught in schools. of course, the economy stinks right now, so there's no money behind it. So tribes and native corporations are trying to step up and fill that gap. At a federal government level, we do a lot of the same types of advocacy efforts. Our congressmen try to make sure that there's funding set aside. And there is a small pot of money through a couple of different departments right now within the government that do fund language preservation, but it's very small.
Yeah, and, you know, I would add, I think, like any movement, getting visibility, getting out there, getting supporters, organizing as much as possible, and that's gonna look different for every group and every, you know, area, I think. So it's customizing it to what you think will get the most attention. And, you know, there have been these studies that show that it reduces suicide. I mean, it is a life or death issue, so I feel like you could possibly shame people into recognizing that it's an important issue, if you get it, if you get that message loud enough, get it out there enough.
There's two questions here. We'll start here and then here, please.
Hi, right now I'm currently taking a local language, my language from Musqueam. And right now it's only available at the university level. And I really like the immersion you had at the preschool level. Is there some kind of template that, you know, maybe could be shared?
Did you hear the question up top?
Is there a template that could be shared for language learning and immersion? Yes and no. So one of the great things about language learning in the community, and when I say the community, that's global. The Maoris have tremendous amount of work that they've done, the Hawaiians, the Cherokees. So when we started the process of really going towards immersion, we reached out to those people who have had a little more experience than us. And some of them had millions of dollars at their disposal and created tons of resources and said, here, you know, we know it's in our language, but we'll give you whatever you need. And that's really how you do it, is you reach out to the people who have done it successfully and you work with them. Nobody's gonna say, no, we're not gonna share with you. Because we're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to preserve our language to better our people. So our contact information is on the film and on the website. We'd be happy to share anything that we've developed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
How about the neighboring tribes? Are they having the same challenge of like declining uplands of speaking the native languages? And is there like a kind of recovering effort that you have been making? Like the other Alaskan tribes, are they doing the same thing?
So the question was whether neighboring tribes are experiencing pretty much the same thing.
So the easiest answer is yes. For the United States, there's 569 tribes. In the state of Alaska, there's 229. There's 10 on Kodiak Island. We're all Alutiiq people. We have two different styles. There's the northern side and the southern side, which is primarily the same, other than a few variances. So the mainland Alaska, there's 12 regions, there's 12 distinct language groups. We're all struggling. Some have made fewer strides than others. If you get into northern Alaska, they had less, what's the word I'm thinking of? You know, where we're from, we had Russian influence, so you saw that in the film. And it's reflected in our language because they conquered our area. They killed thousands of our native people, they enslaved our men. That's why we're pale natives, because, you know, that's what happens. We lost our culture through that. And then after the Russians became the United States government, where there was further assimilation, you heard stories like that too. The northern part of Alaska didn't have that as much. So the Yupik area has phenomenal immersion schools. We're not there yet. You talk to the Cherokees, they have 400,000 tribal members, but they're still trying to save their language too. So it's a global problem.
Can I ask generally about the dialogue or lack of yet between the peoples, which there are so many different language groups and cultures in British Columbia and Washington and so on, how much there's interaction? Are you visited often by Canadians, for example?
We haven't been visited by any Canadians.
Yes.
Yet. I can tell you that, there are a lot of native groups that are shared with Canada. We have Tsimshian natives in Southeast Alaska, Tlingit Haida, in Yup'ik, and in your Yukon territory, you share a lot of those same family groups too. So there is sharing in that respect. We're kind of separated quite a ways from Canada, so we don't have a lot of that yet.
Yes, please.
This is a comment more than a question, but I just want to say it was a beautiful film. I think you did just a glorious job of explaining what the challenges are. And also the young woman in the film, Sadie, I think her name, just such a beautiful job explaining the importance of this work and the importance of saving the language and the importance of culture to her survival. I just thought it was a beautiful film. I thank you for sharing your own experiences. I think it's very brave to do that. And to thank the festival for bringing the film here, getting the opportunity to see it, and especially putting the picture of Sadie on the cover. I think that was a brilliant choice. Yeah, so thank you very much.
How old is Sadie now?
She's 17, she'll be 18 soon. Yeah.
I think we should recognize too that there's a fifth person in our ensemble here, and your pregnancy is mentioned in the film.
I swear I'm not perpetually pregnant. This is a new baby.
Okay. So unless there's any other, yes, here we go.
One more, just to kind of continue on what she was saying about Sadie, I just want to send my deepest regards to her and sharing her story. I have a young daughter here that with my partner, they just came from our language class in our community right before the show, and her story will help to inspire my daughter and those coming, and all the other Indigenous children know that it hits home for them, because in class, it's hard. And so just send our deepest thank you to her for sharing her story.
We will, for sure. And keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us tonight. And thank you all for coming.